Hello and welcome to the NotDepression Webinar, or its alternate name, maybe it's not depression, maybe you just got fucked by Snow White. Those of you who got the NotDepression booklet or saw the Facebook post would perhaps know what that is about, but it's also up first, so we're going to go through it. To everyone watching the replay of this, hello and welcome. This is going to be absolutely amazing. If you got the NotDepression booklet and you have it up in front of you, that's fantastic because you can follow along. If you've printed it out, even better because you can make notes across it. If you have pen and paper, that would be ideal for this. If you don't have any of the above, then you can just sit back, perhaps go into expanded awareness, let this wash over you and take as much of it as you can. This has been a long time coming. I've spent the last 15 years, actually just a little bit more, helping people with things like fears, phobias, and depression, amongst many, many other things, including peak performance athletes and business people and salespeople, all of that type of thing. And for a very, very long time, depression has puzzled me because the way that we approach the depression is so very different to how depression might be approached from a person with lots of important certificates on the wall. Like a general practitioner doctor or a psychologist or a psychiatrist. And there's something that's going horribly wrong here. And there's a couple of reasons for it. One is legal issues. And just to cover those legal issues off, here's my disclaimer. You shouldn't listen to a single thing I say tonight unless you like it. But if I was a medical doctor or a psychiatrist or a psychologist, then I would have to significantly cover my ass and probably wouldn't be putting on a webinar. And if I did put on a webinar, there would be zero useful information in it because those people are giving advice and they just can't do it. You guys already know that there's a depression epidemic going on in the Western world. And I don't think that we're outside any legal bounds at all to say the severe overprescription of antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication and all of that sort of thing. It's horrendous. But you can see the problem already. The people doing the prescribing, if someone walks into your doctor's office and says, hey, I'm having a bit of a shitty time, and you don't prescribe something and then something happens to that person, you're liable. And it's a fucked up system that means that good doctors can't do the right thing by people. They have to write that script, and it's just a horrendous thing. So like I said, this has been a long time coming from me, because most of the people that I see, even if they say, hey, I've got depression, I'm on antidepressants, I say, okay, that's fine. That's between you and your doctor. But maybe we can start to undo some of the processes that are leading to those feelings. Maybe we can start to paint some new neural pathways for some new results. Maybe we can start to let go of some of the associations and the baggage and the stuff that's going on that's anchored inside the body that is producing these predictable results. And that's how we've got to the NotDepression booklet. The NotDepression booklet was meant to be a 5-page thing. I started typing it, it's turned into 20 pages. That's why I've sent you part 1, and part 2 will come to you in a day or two, just to make it so that it's consumable for you. So the purpose of this booklet is to give you some accuracy, and to give you some real world what's going on, so that you can pinpoint what's going on for you, for people around you, or just for your common knowledge, so that you don't get swept up in hysteria as people go popping pills. for any of my friends in America, the pill popping culture over there is 10 times worse than in Australia. And you've already heard me say how bad I think it is in Australia. In America, it's horrendous, and you fuckers don't even understand because you're so deep in it. It's so normal for people to reach for a tablet for something. Like, I don't even take headache medication. You can imagine how horrified I am when I go to conferences in the US and you've got people in effectiveness seminars or productivity seminars talking about what mix of Adderall you should take to get the work coming out of you. These are real examples, and it's horrifying. So there's a lot of work that we have to do here. So my definition, by the way, of if a person has depression, the way that depression is talked about from the institutes, the depression institutes in Australia, by the government, by the medical community, they talk about it like it's a thing, and you've either got it or you don't got it. And so my definition, just rolling off the back of that, is if we could make a change that meant you had not depression, then I'm going to say that it wasn't depression in the first place, it was something else. And here we are. There are 20 things that I have written out for you guys. I'm going to go through the first 10 at least here tonight, which is part 1 of the booklet. And then we'll decide what we do with the final 10, which are just as important because these are not in any particular order. So 20 things that feel like depression that aren't. For those of you following along, this is page 3 of part 1 of your Not Depression booklet. You have things like your reality of life not matching your expectations of life. We're going to talk about that. We're going to spend extra time on that because that is everywhere. That is all pervasive for all people, and you need to constantly manage that one. And that's where the very saucy name or alternate name for this webinar and booklet come from. Maybe you're getting fucked by Snow White. Maybe someone told you some fairy tales, they stuck, you thought that's how life was meant to be, then you're constantly measuring yourself against the princess in the story. Except it's deeper than that, it's everywhere, it's all of the fairy tales you got told. Or perhaps number 2, perhaps you're a compare bear, which is where you go around constantly comparing your life to other people's life. And then there's a really cruel twist as we go through that one, a really cruel twist where people compare the highlights of other people's lives to the worst bit of their own life. So it's not even a fair comparison. Don't be a compare bear. You might be shooting yourself to death. I've got a client like this at the moment. There are just rules for every tiny little thing of how people should behave, including themselves. But if you're shooting yourself to death, then you will have a should and a judgment that goes with that should for anything that a person might do. And you will find yourself very upset, permanently upset at the world. And there's another add-on to that, which is that in the world at the moment, we're going through a change that means that more people are getting more shoulds in their life. In other words, people are more upset than ever before and don't really know what to do with it. So we're going to talk about that. You might be bullied by beliefs. That's where beliefs that got inside of you and they're ruling your world and making you feel really shit. All of these we can unstitch. All of these things we can undo. All of these things we can create a new process for. Therefore, they're not depression, right? Because they're processes and it's not a thing. It's a process that's running and running and running. And by the end of this call, I'll ask you to run these processes differently. Now, if you're helping a person and they have 100 of these things built up, you can't just change one and go, hey, not depression, right? You need to go through, and you might need to deal with half of the things before that person feels any progress at all. Just give me a thumbs up if that's clear, right? Okay, cool. So there's no silver bullet here. There's no panacea. This is hard work, making your life, becoming the type of person that gets a different outcome than a depression outcome by the processes you go through. Let me run through the names of the rest of them, just so they're familiar to you as we go through. You could have unfulfilled values. Maybe you're not hitting your hinging points, which is your unique code. It's how your body runs. You could have a natural depression. This is where you're not getting enough sunlight or movement, that type of thing. Like if you go to the doctor, they don't even fucking ask about that. How could they though, in 7 to 15 minutes? Right? There's not enough time for you to tell your story and for them to do a worthwhile checklist of what might be producing depression-like symptoms. So instead, they're just treating the symptom rather than the thing causing it. It's weird. You might be overstimulated, and in 2019, it's safe to say this is every single one of you. There's no escaping. You are a fiend for dopamine, and as much as you might try and escape, it's very, very difficult. So we're going to go through that, because that overstimulation, it runs you dry and it produces depression-like symptoms. You might have, I've called the next one oversized baggage. This is where you're carrying around more baggage than you ought. There's some of that shit needs to be let go. For some people, they are producing depression-like symptoms because it's the only way they know to get love, connection, and attention from the people around them. But there's a second set that we're going to go through, which is that for some people, and this is on the same point, the way they used to get love, connection, and attention isn't available to them anymore, and that will cause a very severe lot of emotions that you would call depression. So the easy example is if you used to get recognition everywhere for being a sports star, and you're no longer a sports star, and you're not feeling that love, attention, and connection, and you haven't hooked up a new way of getting it, you will feel like shit. Like absolute fucking rubbish. And this is why behind the scenes, for all the people in the know for elite athletes, this is the biggest thing for athletes, is after their career, their addictions like sex addiction, gambling addictions, drinking, drug addictions, it's so prevalent, like it's more common than not common. Right? And so, but that's an easy example. If you used to get love, attention, and connection from someone or in a way that you can't get anymore, that will cause a huge gap in your life. Most people would call that depression. We would call that, hey, listen up, dickhead. We need to hook you up to a new way of getting love, attention, and connection, and one that equally replaces the old one. Right? It needs to have the same bandwidth, and that's going to take some real energy to get that going. The next one I called funny focus. This is where your focus in life, and everyone knows someone like this, where they walk into a room and all they're seeing is the negative. Their focus just always runs to the wrong thing. Right? Now, this can be hard to get back. We do this in our skydiving workshop to the largest degree of controlling that focus and making sure you own it. I called number 12 dirty drugs, and I have regretted calling it that because I realized for anyone who's in this category, which might be drug addiction, alcohol addiction, or perhaps you don't call it addiction, perhaps you just happen to drink a bottle of wine every single night. Same shit, dirty drugs, right? This will fuck up your body, and it will cause those same depression-like symptoms. But you can see we need to go back to before the bottle of wine is opened and go, what's causing that? It could just be a habit, in which case we only need to undo the habit. Or maybe you have 30 years of hating your mother behind the opening the bottle every single night, and we need to resolve that piece there. Okay, so there's a lot of work to do on some of these. Number 13, two-faced tearing, and this is where you have some sort of inner conflict. Everyone has these inner conflicts. I am still yet to meet a person that is completely and wholly aligned. I haven't met that person yet. So maybe when Jesus comes back, we're like, hey, there's a person with no parts conflicts inside them. Although I think that Jesus at the moment would be looking down on earth and going, do I come back as a chick? Because that's really a big deal at the moment. And I don't want to go down to earth in this toxic masculine form. That would be bad. Do you know what? I'm going to go, I don't know. If I was Jesus, that's why he hasn't come back yet. You guys know that, right? Because we're having all these arguments about masculine, feminine, and Jesus, like, Jesus, which is a self-reference. It's weird. He talks to himself all the time. So that's why he hasn't come back. It's pretty simple. But he is whole and aligned. She is whole and complete and aligned. But the rest of us flawed beings, we have a lot of conflicts inside, and those conflicts will cause a split in your focus, a split in your direction. And it means you can't have 100% fulfillment. It's impossible. But I want you to be quite clear on what I'm saying, is that I have never met a single person that could possibly or technically have 100% fulfillment. I'm yet to meet that person. It's just not possible because of how the coping mechanisms. By the way, parts conflicts are totally normal things. They're there to protect you. It's just that they can cause problems if you leave them be. You need to resolve them. Unfulfilled love strategies. We've all dealt with this at some point in time. You're in a relationship. You've got a certain code inside of you, which is how you know you're loved, and the other person doesn't do it for you. They don't punch in your PIN code. They're not hitting your hot buttons, and that will cause you to feel unfulfilled in that relationship. If that goes on, because imagine a person feels slightly unfulfilled in their romantic relationship, from their parents, from their children, from the rest of their family, at work, you can see how easy it is to dive into a depression-like state when really what we've got to do is teach people how to treat us, right? Because this partner of yours is showing you love, just not in the language that you can understand. Perhaps you need to receive it through touch, and they're trying to do it by cooking you meat pies, and you're eating the meat pies. Don't get me wrong, you're still eating the meat pies, but you're still feeling unfulfilled. And then that causes you to eat more pies, right? And then that goes back to our overstimulated bit where you're trying to feed your emotions, and probably also our natural depression bit where, like, Jesus didn't intend for you to only eat pies. So unfulfilled love strategies can be a real problem. We also have shaky structures, and perhaps you'll need to wait for the second part 2 of the booklet to come out to fully understand this one. But hopefully I can explain it well here. You could be in the wrong job, in the wrong relationship, in the wrong family, in the wrong country, at the wrong era of time. And so if your structure is wrong, then you will have depression-like feelings, but it isn't depression. Because if you just need to change jobs and everything's fine, that's not fucking depression, right? That doesn't deserve a pill. Do you guys follow me? That deserves, hey, let's find the next job, or let's find you the friends that will support you. In fact, medication numbs it and in many cases can make it worse. Disclaimer: if you're on antidepressant medication, that would be the best Freudian slip ever. If you took antidepressant meditation, then that would really actually work. What I meant to say was antidepressant medication. And if you're taking it, please never go cold turkey. It doesn't matter how good this webinar is. Go back to your doctor and make a program to wean off it if that's what you and your doctor decide to do. And with everything here, I might treat some of these points flippantly, but I'm only doing it to catch your attention. There is work to be done behind every single one of these. Okay, that's the disclaimer. Now back to the fun. Speaking of fun, point 16, death, injury, and illness can really cause havoc in people's lives. One of my clients at the moment, great guy, he is on a crusade. His son suicided a number of years ago now, and he wants to make sure other families don't have to go through what him and his family went through. I'm not sure if you guys know, but there's this thing called postvention. So a lot of people are trying to do prevention for suicide. Postvention is where we are putting all of our energy because statistically, if someone suicides, the chance that the people in the circle around them suicide goes up significantly. Right, and this is all in point 16 there. You've got to be careful around these super loaded meanings that we make, particularly around illness and death in our culture. We make a big deal about it, and so you want to be very well set up to be able to handle that type of thing when it comes your way. Financial stress is a major killer of relationships, but it can also really get you down. You've heard terms like drowning in debt. Like this can really be a problem. But again, like if you can't fix it, then sure, that would qualify as our definition for depression, wouldn't it? But if there were a way that we could pay attention to it and do something about it, then that would be not depression. That would be, I'm in a financial crunch at the moment. Let's get started on all the things I need to do. Fantastic example. A friend I went to school with, he wanted to buy a house just as the Sydney property market started to really spike. And so that was a long time ago now, early 2000s. It started to really go off. So a house in the suburb that I grew up in, went from maybe $400,000. Suddenly they were $800,000, $900,000. And he's gone, well, shit, we can't do this. So he did a tree change and changed jobs, went out to the country. They bought themselves a beautiful house for $300,000, and they skipped any financial depression. Right? Does that make sense? So that was fixable for him. He felt like they were drowning. There was no options in Sydney for them. Boom, location change, and changed the whole thing. He even, a couple of years after they bought that house, he lost his job for a year and couldn't find another one, and it was fine. It would have been very different with a $500,000 mortgage over their head, or today's dollars, $1.5 million mortgage over their head, same suburb. Okay, so last three here, the midlife crisis one. By the way, when we get to this in part two, this is mainly for men, and it's a super interesting topic, but men go through this funny little structural life change that when you tell people about it, they're like, yep, that's exactly what happened to me. More men need to understand this. Women can have midlife crises at any age. Very capable, but men go through it in a more predictable step-by-step formula. Number 19 is meaning maker. And this is pointing out that you're a meaning-making creature. You make everything mean something. And if you're not in charge of the meaning you're ascribing to things, you might end up in some sort of anxiety-ridden position or depression-ridden position. And imagine if it's just because you gave a meaning to something that wasn't even true. You made it up. You enforced it on yourself. You made yourself feel like shit. That would be can I say, a dumb thing to do? If you're doing it to yourself, like, now's the time to change that, because you don't want to have depression and be called out for doing dumb shit. So might as well change the whole lot. So number 20, bad bacteria, is all the things we know now about the bacteria on our skin, in our guts, gut-brain connection, etc., 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 and just making sure that you are getting the basics of that right. When it goes wrong, it can go really, really wrong. How are you guys feeling so far? You're good? Okay, wonderful. Some lovely smiles there. That's awesome. Let's go through them in more depth. Number 1, you got fucked by Snow White. This is everyone. Can we just be clear on that? You might not have depression, but every single person is getting fucked by Snow White. So this happens when your expectations of life don't match your reality. And we want to make sure that, so most people's expectations of life are set quite high through advertising, media, your parents. You know, if you've got well-meaning parents and they're like, I'm going to give you everything I never had. So if you're a baby boomer parent, no doubt you had that thought run through your head when you had kids. I'm going to give them everything that I never had. Well, you accidentally just fucked your kids because you're a well-meaning person and you accidentally set the expectations for life high. If they then grow up and their perceived reality of that is lower, they're going to have what is called the disappointment gap. Okay, so if so my parents, they gave everything to our schooling, and so my dad grew up. He didn't have a father. He single mother. When he was 15, he was doing odd jobs on the weekend to contribute to the household fund because he lived alone with his mum in a small flat. He then had to go and work to pay for his own university, etc. So when it came to our education, they stopped at nothing. Right? My parents went, okay, we're sending you to the best school that we can find. If there's an extracurricular activity which you think you'd enjoy or is going to add something, then do it. We were encouraged the whole way through. But can you see the bar starts creeping with that, doesn't it? Right? Not on purpose, because if you ask my parents, they will say, and they will genuinely mean, no, you can do whatever you want to do, but as the receiver of a fine education, there's a pressure to go and complete university, to get a good job, to start climbing the ladder, to buy a house, right? It comes part and parcel, and there's nothing my parents could do to try and undo that. Does that make sense to you guys? There was an expectation that was set, and it was set here, and unfortunately I was good at school, so that expectation just stretched from every teacher, like but also they tried to shape my life with it, those fuckers. Like, I went to the school counselor at the end of year 12 and I said, you know, what university course should I be looking at? You guys hear the expectation? There was no, you know, should I take a gap year? There was no, should I become a garbologist? There was no, what TAFE course is available? It was university and it had to be a tier 1 university. That's just what got set in. The combination of the expensive education, the teachers, the et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So they said, you're good at maths, physics, and chemistry, you should go and do engineering. Can you see where the rest of the life expectations are set from there? Right? Oh, you're going to be an engineer. That's professional. It's white collar. You'll earn this much money, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's all set. And so any bit of my life that was beneath that starts to get measured, or because I could feel on track for it and that wouldn't be a problem, would it? If my income is this level while I'm at university and it's going to get me there, it's totally fine. It's not a problem. But the second I start to fall short of those expectations, it's the disappointment gap. That disappointment over time, if you let it go over time, turns into depression. Right? Depression from this angle is institutionalized disappointment. So, some examples for you. Right? So we've got the fairy tale example. You understand that? Girls growing up hoping that they're going to find Prince Charming, hoping that they're going to find the one. Sorry to break it to you. He doesn't exist. And if he does exist, he exists for about 6 months. And then he starts to control you. Some of you have been through this. That fairy tale thing that we do for girls, that expectation that we put on boys. Examples of these expectations, that there's the one out there for you, that you can earn enough money that you don't have to worry about money anymore. It's just not true. That happy endings don't require effort. They always require ongoing effort. If you're ever trying to, right? Even the term settling down is an expectation that cannot be fulfilled, which will cause disappointment, which over time could cause a depression-like feeling. The most common thing, by the way, in case you guys didn't already figure out, for the first 10 years of my business, my clientele was about 95% female and a couple of guys. And then over time, and it's now about 70% female, about 30% male. And one of the most common things that I've helped people with is this notion, like, especially for women, like, oh, I'm coming up on 30, and they start to get this angsty disappointment. I should have achieved, boom, 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 boom. And then there's this list. I should have traveled. I should have had a career. I should have been promoted by now. I should have had a baby. I should have met the one. I should have bought a house. I should have an investment property. And the list goes on and on and on. I should have been to the Maldives. And they feel like I should have this by this age. And then the same can happen for 40, and the same can happen for 50, and the same can happen for retirement. And it hurts real bad if we don't do something about it. You can have expectations of your kids if you're a parent, right? That they should look a certain way, walk, talk, and act a certain way, so that they're not a disappointment to you. Here's what we need to do. To get rid of the depression, to get rid of the disappointment, we need to switch these things. We need to set the expectations so that they're lower than your perceived reality. That's the solution. So we're into solutions now, right? You need to set your expectations so that they are lower than your perceived reality. I'll give you some examples. And this is why I wanted to do a webinar to accompany the booklet. Otherwise, the booklet would be 100 pages long. So for me, I wake up every single day and my expectation is set to floor level with things like genuine beliefs of mine, which is like, I'm not in Uganda getting my arms and legs hacked off. It's a good day, right? Everyone else has their expectations up here. Mine are through the floor. The world doesn't owe me anything. People don't owe being nice to me, kind to me. All of that would be wonderful, but it's not owed to me. right? Can you see the difference between the person who feels like the world owes them politeness, right? That person's going to get upset in 3.2 seconds after leaving their front door. Because the person in the cafe, the person on the train station, someone is going to break their precious expectation. They're going to experience the disappointment gap. And then worse, they're going to tell other people about it, which reinforces it. It anchors it in. It's impossible to do if you just set your expectations lower than your perceived reality. I have a belief that I adopted from the very first NLP course that I ever did. We were talking about beliefs and powerful, and one of my favorite words, robust beliefs that you can have about the world. And I was like, do you know what would be a robust belief? Is that you could take me anywhere, take away all my money, strip away all my clothes, take me to the middle of the desert, and I'm going to come back stronger than ever before. Can you see where that expectation is sitting? Right? It's sitting very, very low. The world doesn't owe me anything. You could take everything away from me and I'm still going to be fine. And if I'm not in Uganda getting my arms and legs hacked off, then today's a good day. And there is only one time where I'm ever going to have to change that expectation. If I wake up in Uganda and someone is chopping off my arms, then I'm going to have to find a new flaw so that I can go, do you know what? At least it's just the arms. You guys following along? Okay. But it's gritty, it's robust, and you need to set it this way. Otherwise, you're going to suffer from the disappointment gap. Now, if you're just a normal person, you're mid-range, so you're going about life, you have these expectations, they're not all coming true. You're experiencing disappointment, but you're coping with it. Well, then that's great. You're getting through, but it's not enough, is it? You don't want to go for the rest of your life just coping. We want you to be vibrant. We want you to be radiant. We want you to really own the rest of your life. And you can achieve that by downgrading your expectations and upgrading your activity. So that's the final piece to this here. You lower the expectation and you increase the activity. You increase the standards, if you like. You increase the bits that you're in charge of and decrease the bits that everyone else is in charge of. Okay? Now, there are some big things that you have expectations about. You have expectations, for example, about the environment. Right? And you're like, we don't want to live in a polluted world. And I agree. Except that if you go around demanding a clean world, then at the moment you're going to be permanently disappointed by that. So if you go around having an expectation of a clean environment, if you go around having an expectation that people are good people, if you join a movement that has 2 words and only 5 letters and a hashtag in front of it, and you say people shouldn't do stuff to us, you're going to be disappointed, right? So what am I looking for here? I'm looking that you reset your expectations under reality, but you do it in a way that serves the world to move forward. Okay? So at the moment, at this point in history, there was an advertisement by a company hoping to get some traction in the world, and they put out this thing like, hey, men shouldn't catcall at people, they shouldn't harass people. And if you adopt that, you are going to fuck your entire life, because reality will not match with that. You are not in charge of other people. There are people out there who will push the envelope, who will harass you, and if you get in the wrong situation, all the other stuff too. You are not owed a safe passage through this world. And if you get it through your fucking head that you will fuck up your life. Don't do it. I believe I'm being very clear on this. You must set a working expectation that serves you. And that's going to sound like, hey, most people are good people, but there are some real fucking losers out there. Does that make sense? And we have succeeded in taking an unrealistic expectation, setting it where it's meant to be. You cannot suffer from disappointment anymore, which means you can't get this type of depression. Are you with me so far? Now you can go through every day and your perceived reality will hopefully, nearly every day of your life, be above that. Okay, so it's robust. Okay, so that's what needs to happen. But the second you set your expectations above what the statistics are, the second you set them above what reality is, you are screwing your own life. Don't do it. Absolutely don't do it. Do you know what's even worse than that? I just found a fucking spelling mistake and it's really pissing me off. So it's terrible, I know. So it gets hardcore because what I'm saying to you is that you need to vigorously shake the tree. You need to really aim for this vibrant, robust way of thinking about the world where every single day you can be on top, right? If the world doesn't owe you anything, then every single thing that happens that's good, you're like, wow, that's awesome. Everything is awesome when you set the floor correctly so that you can now experience and measure everything up from there, right? If I go, people don't need to be nice to me, then every person who's nice to me, I'm like, oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. That's awesome. This is wonderful. Every single person who's not nice to me, I'm like, oh, thank fuck I'm not them. Which is another example of the type of programming you would put in to lay a floor of expectation there. So how do you get at some of these things? Well, you could, every single day, you could reset your expectations, right? And you could program that in. You could get into Stoic philosophy. You could use something like mindfulness meditation as a reset and a reset and a reset to ground yourself in and get back to just living in the moment. You could use NLP techniques to let go of all of the past anchors, associations, beliefs that were holding your expectations high, right? And you could use that to let them go. Remember, we want expectation low and then your activity and your standards high. Okay, so we don't miss anything here. Some people, when we're talking about the Me Too stuff, they're like, oh, what, you're just going to let people get away with it? Like, absolutely not. We're just going to let go of the unrealistic, unreasonable expectation that every single person is going to conform to your personal rules. Because that's where people do damage themselves. And finally, you could use modeling techniques to identify the type of person you want to become, distill that from others and install it in yourself. All of these are at our NLP training. A bunch of you have already done it, which is awesome. You can open the manual and get back into reinstalling these things. Point 2. Here we go, friends. You doing all right? Give me a wave. You having fun? Do you like that? I said, give me a wave. You started waving. I said, if you're having fun. And I'm like, gotcha. So number 2 is you don't want to be a compare bear. Comparison is the thief of joy. This is such an amazing saying, right? We compare things because we think we're being diligent. We're doing our research. We're finding different strategies. Your ability to compare things and make distinctions will help you on the strategy side of life. It will not help you one iota on the living side of life. Okay, so I want you to be a compare bear for strategy, and I want you to drop that away for the living of things, for the doing of things, and for the being of things. Unfortunately, comparison is in your face every moment of every day at the moment. Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, and every other social media platform that I've never heard of, it is non-stop comparison. And then, like I said, there's this second cruel bit, which is where you might accidentally compare the highlights of everyone else to your perceived lowlights, right? So you're sitting, scrolling through Instagram while you're taking a shit, and people always laugh, like, the statistics show that this is like 70% of the population who are guilty of, shall we call it, sitting and scrolling. But if you ask people point blank, I've never met a person, not a single person who does it. So there's a lot of liars in the world. That's why your expectations need to be low. People will lie about when they're using their phone. Because here's the thing, Google knows where you are. Right? Facebook knows where you are. They have a GPS thing, and they're like, oh, you're shooting again, and scrolling. That's not a very good time to be a compare bear. You're having a vulnerable moment, and you're looking at someone else's dream holiday that they faked on Photoshop. Right? And you're feeling, it's the same as before, right? We had expectations and reality and a disappointment gap. When you're comparing things, it's the same disappointment gap, different reason. Are you guys with me? Okay. So this is everywhere. This is every bit of advertising, marketing. You know, men used to get off lightly on this because there weren't sort of, the worst we had was the Chesty Bonds ad. And you're like, oh, I don't look like that guy at all. But women used to cop it like from every single angle, but now it is men as well. And social media has ensured that, and now everyone, just because I've got six-pack abs, everyone wants them. That's why I try and hide them. So, advertising, media, books, TV shows, movies, right? And like, let's just take a really simple, innocent looking activity like watching a superhero movie, right? If you're watching, and there's 1,000 of them at the moment, all the Marvel things and that sort of thing, they're all wearing skin-tight latex outfits. Not sure if you've noticed that. They have editors who go through and Photoshop the movie frame by frame, right? And you are accidentally comparing yourself to that. It leads to a disappointment gap. We don't want that. So we don't want you to be a compare bear for the living of life. So you have to be, you have to be so vigilant, especially because you carry around your own personal self-destruct tool now, right? If you want to ruin your life, you just need to open this thing up and go and see what everyone else says they're up to, right? Because guaranteed they are not up to that thing. I know people that work like 24/7, but they'll take 5 minutes to run down to the dock or run down to the beach to take a lifestyle shot to put on social media, right? This is more normal than you think, okay? And that's what you're comparing to, someone else's lie. So, solutions to, if you're being a compare bear. First one is to get a good look behind the scenes in people's life. I've been lucky enough, I've had more than 15 years. I get to see behind the curtains, right? when we hosted the supermodel search, you know, if you compared what this person looked like on their Instagram to how they felt on the inside, you would think they are different people. Okay, but I get to see behind the scenes. It's a blessing because you end up knowing for sure that everyone has to wipe their own ass in the morning, right? There are some great leveling beliefs. And, you know, if you just, I don't know why people are interested in celebrity at all. Right? You see the rate of self-destruction, Britney Spears, Lindsay Lohan, like we could just go on forever, and yet people are still aspiring to be like them. It's mental. So take a good look behind the scenes of what people's lives are actually like, and that will destroy that comparison. That's one way of doing it. You could release any limiting beliefs you have around the type of person you should compete with, or who you should be. You could install powerful new beliefs like I'm a lucky person or I'm worthy of love. You can do practices to ground yourself, and a fantastic one would be a daily gratitude practice where you can convincingly take your focus from other people's highlights reels to what is actually going on for you. It's an amazing way to take back control of your comparison filter, right? Which is wonderful. Hi, Terry. How you doing? So the third one here. Some of you are shooting yourself to death. This is where, like, we all have hundreds of thousands of programs inside of us. And you can think of these programs like little rules. And this shooting yourself to death is when you have rules about how other people should behave. Because if they don't live up to that little rule, then you're going to feel pretty terrible about it. There's a little bit of overlap between this one and the two that came before it, but it definitely deserves its own point here. So, these shoulds, right? People shouldn't be rude. Men should behave this way. Women should behave this way. People shouldn't lie or steal or harm me in any way. Again, in 2019, I want to be abundantly clear. Any shoulds that you have around equality, which could be gender equality or race equality or any of these things, any shoulds you have around fairness or social justice and equality will end up with you feeling bad. Okay, so don't do it to yourself, right? Structurally, like equality or equity, if you prefer, is a nice thing to aim for, but don't put it on the inside because the world will continue to disappoint you. You guys picking up what I'm putting down? All right, good. So if you have a rule, for instance, that violence is bad, or people shouldn't be violent, or people shouldn't eat animals, or whatever it happens to be, that little should will just niggle you every single minute of every single day. But imagine you have a rule that says people shouldn't be violent, and then you're also, because you're a crazy person, watching the evening news. Now you've got an unreasonable should that can never be lived up to, combined with a if it bleeds, it leads panic station broadcast. And it's not hard to see with the rise of that style of media and the social media and people having more shoulds, more rules than ever before, why so many people are getting tangled up in this. Nice people, normal people, and the worst one, well-meaning people. Well-meaning people have a lot of shoulds. They have more shoulds than the ordinary person, and it's just more stuff to get tangled on. So the question, my friends, is how do we keep your aspirations? How do we keep your vision for a better world? How do we keep these goals and not trip over the starting line? Okay, so step one, so we're into the solutions already. Step one is to remove the shoulds as you go and approach the world, right? You can leave the shoulds in the future. I hope that one day such and such, or I'm aiming for, right? But the shoulds will cause you to trip over it in the short term, okay? So we want to make some sustainable rules, okay? Like people are inherently good. That's a sustainable rule. Does that make sense? It still leaves room for people to be horrible or mean or have a bad day, but it's not a should that will trip you up. How do you do it? Well, step one, release the emotional baggage that's around your rules. Step two, release the rules. Step three, write some new sustainable rules. If you guys haven't already come across it, there's a wonderful Freakonomics podcast about trust in communities. Okay, so basically, here's the skinny. If you walk around with a bunch of rules, like a bunch of shoulds, looking for people to not live up to your rules, you will start to erode away the trust basis of your community. And that's where a community begins to live in fear, right? Either proper fear, like in America, where you have to carry a gun against your own countrymen, which is weird, or just the general fear that's being felt and expressed in Australia at the moment, like we want to feel safe walking home at night. But you cannot say the phrase, I want to feel safe walking home at night, enough times for it to happen. Because the fact that you're saying it erodes the very trust that needs to be built for you to actually get to that end game. Am I making sense here? So we need to find a way to take the shoulds out so that we can put in the actual pieces, the Genesis pieces that lead to a good community, right? And this is, instead of saying, hey, men should behave this way, it's saying good morning to people, right? They're tiny, they're micro actions, right? And we want to cultivate and nurture these micro actions. But you can't do it if you've got all these rules in your head, because you'll trip over the rule every single time. Okay, so we need to remove those rules and put in new, empowering ones, and they're not always right there in front of you. Okay, so an easy way to understand the long-term implications of this is if you've got a 25-year-old person and they're going to jail because they beat someone up, you might say that's a bad person, they need to be punished. But if you rewind their life to when they were 20, to when they were 15, to when they were 10, to when they were 5, like they weren't born a bad person. At some point, they took a different path. And just to sum this up, every single person out there doing things that are uncharitable in our community, the types of things that would end you up in jail, it starts with not love. That person feels unwanted, unloved, right? And that over time can lead to these types of undesirable behavior. So how do we create a community that doesn't have that? Well, you need to make people feel loved, accepted, and that sort of thing, right? You can't do that if you have a bunch of shoulds in your head. They all need deleting, and we need to come at this from a more robust point of view, which is that we need to develop trust. We need to develop love. We need to develop ways that people can feel supported, but without robbing them of their dignity. So we can't go giving handouts because that doesn't work, right? We need to find these ways of building, and you can't build from the, oh, you shouldn't do that, or that's not right, right? It needs to build from a place of love. That gets pretty deep pretty fast, doesn't it? All right, number 4, my beautiful friends. Bullied by beliefs. So most of the beliefs that you have aren't even your beliefs. They came from somewhere else. They might have come from your parents or from school. You know, how many people out there had a Catholic education and have guilt inside of them, but they don't know why? It just got installed in them. Or the classic of Irish guilt, Jewish guilt, Catholic guilt. These things just sneak inside. So if you are bullied by your own beliefs, you could feel pretty terrible. Like beliefs like nobody loves me, or I'm too tall, short, fat, thin. I'm not smart enough, funny enough, capable enough, or talented enough. I'm a bad mother or a bad parent. I don't deserve a good relationship. If you have these types of beliefs, it will cause depression-like feelings, but it's not depression. Because we can change the belief and the feeling will change, like instantly change. If you have been to an NLP training, you have experienced this, and you know that instantaneous shift from having the old belief to it's just gone, perhaps even replaced by a new powerful belief. So it's pretty simple. If you're bullied by beliefs from the inside, but mind you, then we need to either reframe those beliefs, find a new perspective, or find counterpoints to loosen that belief up. Then you can use your NLP techniques to release those limiting beliefs and the negative emotion around the events that created them in the first place. Perhaps your first boyfriend, when you were breaking up with him, said, "No one will ever want you," and for some reason it just stuck. You don't want to walk around with that. Right? That accidentally becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy if you let it. So we need to deal with that. We need to resolve it. We need to let that go. We need to find a reframe where that's gone. And then we can install new, more powerful beliefs and emotions. So, my beautiful friends, we are 4 points through our 20 points. But because I promised you an hour and some people will need to go now, I just want to tell you about a way that you can get all of this, right? Some of you have done our NLP training before. Some of you haven't done the NLP training before. If you've done the training before, we're holding another one. You get the special reattend price. It's fabulous. Come along, top up your skills. If you have never done our NLP training before, then you are going to want to check this out. I'm dropping the link on your chat box. And you can see there, I'm holding a very special 5-day, super intense NLP training. It is the full content from our normal 7-day training. Nothing dropped out. It's in 5 days. It goes 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. It's super intense. It is here at the Scary and Exciting House. It's amazing. It's a very limited training because of the number of beds that we have here. So you get a lot of attention. These trainings are normally $4,000, $5,000. I've made it accessible to everyone. So if you have never done an NLP training before, check out that link, check out that price, and you get to come here, stay here, do the training with me. The next one coming up is March 8 to 12. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. You only need to take 3 days off work, which is amazing compared to, you know, the extra time you'd have to take for the 7-day training. Every single solution that we've been through so far tonight, and all the ones that are coming, exist at this training with the exception of Stoic philosophy, which you'll have to read in your own time. Tracy, is that babysitting for Brooke or the next one? Look, it's just the best time ever. The price is so good. It's half what you should be paying. And for those of you who have done your NLP training with Scary and Exciting before, so you've done it with me under the Scary and Exciting banner, then you get an even more special reattend price. And there is a separate link for that, which I've just dropped there. So if you've not done it with me and Scary and Exciting before, it's the first link. If you've done it with me and Scary and Exciting before, it's the second link. I think half the spots are gone already. They'll all be gone by the end of this week. So if you want to come along, check that out, and let's do it. Like, it's an absolute no-brainer. And these are the skills to help yourself and to help anyone else with all of these things, all these 20 points. After this training, you would be able to help yourself or help another person with, which is insane. It's so wonderful. So awesome. So there are the links. You can go through. The enrollment is at the bottom there. It'll automatically enroll you. And we're just going to have the best time ever. So I'm going to keep going with our content here. Click that link. If for whatever reason you can't do it on whatever device you're on at the moment, then drop me a Facebook or an email straight away, and I will send you the link so you can look at it after this call. Okay. Number 5 out of 20 of things that are not depression, but feel like depression, but they're not depression. Number 5 is unfulfilled values. So your values are what are important to you. They form pretty early on in your life, in the imprint period and the modeling period. So ages 0 to 14, your values are pretty well set. You can break them and change them after that, but it's going to take something. And so the first thing to note is not all of your values are actually yours. You might be living your parents' values, and that's not exactly how you want to live your life. Guys, can you just tell me if, can you hear that? Is there any change in the sound? You can't hear the fan? We're all good? Okay. We're all good. Fantastic. Thank you. I'm roasting. It's a slow roast, and probably there'll be a bit of crackling on the outside, a bit of pork belly. So just come for that. For the unfulfilled values, the values might not even be yours. You might have carried through values from your parents, from your schooling, from your religion, and we want to ditch any values that aren't yours. That will cause you to feel unfulfilled straight away, because you could be chasing what you think your values are, but they're not actually yours, they're your parents, and you're going to feel like shit, even if you have fulfilled them. Or the second thing is, if you know your values and you're not fulfilling them, that will also feel terrible. and that will feel like depression, but it's not depression, it's just unfulfilled values. And what we need to do is find out what these values are in ranking order and begin to fulfill them. Okay, so some examples of where it feels like depression, but it's not. Like, let's say adventure is a high value for you, but you're stuck in a shitty job with 2 weeks a year annual leave. Hello, most of America. Then you might feel terrible because your adventure value is not fulfilled, and it will feel, especially over time, it'll feel like depression, but it's not fucking depression. It is an unfulfilled value. How do we know? Because if we make a switch and we fulfill it, it will instantly repair itself. Those feelings won't be there anymore. So, other examples, let's say family is a very high value for you, but they all died, or they live very far away, or they don't like you, then you will not be getting the fulfillment you want in your family bit of the values. And that will cause you to feel unfulfilled. That unfulfillment will feel like depression, but it's not. How do we know? Because if we go and fulfill it, instantly you will feel differently. Sometimes you have values that are competing with each other, a values conflict. Let's say that you want to spend more time with your family, but you also have, say, money as a value, and so you have to work very long hours. These two values will compete, and if you go over here, you'll feel unfulfilled here. If you go back to the family, you'll feel unfulfilled here. That unfulfillment will feel like depression, but it's not. It's just a values conflict. So what do we need to do? We need to resolve any of the inner conflict that is causing you to feel like those values are in conflict. We need to release any of the limiting beliefs that are surrounding that topic. We need to find out what your values are. Fancy word is elicit. Unfancy is we need to list out your values, rank them in order, get rid of any old values that aren't yours, and then make sure your life mirrors your values. It's such a simple thing, but people don't do it. It's very easy to come out of values alignment when you're living your life, when you're going through the motions, when you don't have a quarterly check-in with yourself just to make sure that you're still on track. When you say yes to things, there's people out there that if someone asks them to do something, their default answer is yes. That's ridiculous. You should at least ask the question, is this aligned with my values? Otherwise, it's you screwing you, and then it's you complaining to everyone about how bad it feels. It's you. Stop it. Stop it. We want you to know what your values are and act in alignment with those values. Okay, so that's the first bit, and we've got that. Most people don't even get that far, but when you get to the end of that, then we need to add the next bit, which is we also need to set the expectation that your values won't always be fulfilled. Because otherwise you'll be there hoping that every day is full to the brim, and that's not how life works. So we want to know what your values are. We want your life to mirror those values, but then we want robust beliefs around that so that when you're having a shitty day, it's just a shitty day. And then you can bounce back the next day. That's what we want for you. Okay, so those are the values. You can have quite a few things going wrong with them there. Let's get through a couple more of these, my friends, and then we're gonna we've got another full part 2 of the Not Depression booklet that's coming out your way. Looks like we can go through another full webinar. If you guys want, I'll keep going through these because we want to make it so that you are not the victim, accidentally tripping off one of these 20 things, thinking that you're having a really terrible time in life, when actually it's a process and we can find a way to put it right. Here's one that's really, really fun. This is unique, scary, and exciting content. Point 6 in your manual. And, oh, that's nice. Brooke, you're getting compliments for your solo fashion parade. All right. So I think she said 1 month to go, correct? Okay, cool. 1 month to go. So the number 6 is your hinging points. This is your unique code. And it's surprising to me that this content isn't more widely known, but I guess it's my job to bring it to you and to bring it to the world. It's called your hinging points. This is your unique code, how you're put together. The easy way to understand hinging points. By the way, we spend 8 weeks on hinging points at summer school. That entire online program is just about these hinging points, activating it, knowing your unique code so that you can go forward and operate your machinery really well in the world. So this is a very, very short, fast way of understanding it. Your hinging points are what makes you work. The absence of your hinging points means the wheels fall off. So if your hinging points are that you need to eat regularly, otherwise you get hangry, then you need to eat regularly so the wheels don't fall off. I very clearly enjoy eating, but I could go all day without eating and I don't disintegrate. I don't get hangry. I don't get frustrated, tired. I don't get a headache. Everything's just fine, probably because I could survive for 2 weeks in the desert without any new food. But it's not a problem. Whereas other people, if they don't have food every couple of hours, the wheels fall off. Does that make sense? Right? It's something that's essential to your functioning. And some of you have very standard hinging points, like you need me time. Without your me time, the show's over. Without regular food or good quality food, it's all over. They're very standard hinging points. And some of you have obscure hinging points, like that you need to prove someone wrong. If you've got someone to prove wrong, you are game on, switched on, turned on. You turn up and you go all day to prove that person wrong. That's a hinging point. And when you don't have anyone to prove wrong, you don't do anything. That's a hinging point. Does that make sense? So that's an obscure one, a bit of a weird one. So some of you need to work as part of a team as a hinging point. Some of you have to have some autonomy in your role. You have to have some ownership. Otherwise, it's no deal. And some of you don't care. If you don't care, it's not a hinging point. Preferences are different from hinging points. Hinging points are essential for you to be turned on. Preferences are just preferences. Right? So I enjoy eating, but it's not a hinging point. I enjoy sleeping, but it's not a hinging point. I could skip a night's sleep and still function the next day. It's not a hinging point for me. Okay? So some of you need support around you. Some of you need a vision or a purpose or a mission. Some of you need to be fighting for something. If you're not fighting for something, you don't show up for it. You need to figure out what your unique code is, what your hinging points are. You need to know them intimately. So if you haven't done summer school, that might be a good place to look. That's the place we go the deepest on them. We touch on them at the NLP course as well, but it's a shorter segment. You need to discover your hinging points. Here's how you do it. You ask yourself a couple of questions. Under what circumstances would I naturally do this, right? Because you might not like cleaning the toilet, but if friends were coming over and you're in there scrubbing and polishing that bowl, then you know you have some sort of hinging point about how you're perceived, or about friends or family, or what other people think of you. Right? If you're the type of person where friends are coming over and you still don't clean the toilet, it's not a hinging point. How could you get to do it? And some of you go, oh, I wouldn't do it if someone was turning up. You can't threaten me into it, but I would do it if it was scheduled, if it was in my diary. Okay, great. That's your hinging point. Discover it and then lock it in. Make sure you're living your life in accordance with these hinging points. Because, my friends, if you are off your hinging points, then your motivation goes to bupkis. The whole show starts to fall apart. You might start to develop some depression-like symptoms, but it's not depression. It's just you not hitting your unique code. It's just that your hinging points, the very things that make things work, aren't fulfilled. That's all. Okay? So, I have some obscure hinging points, right? I am the type of person, I won't do anything for myself. I'm not naturally motivated from the inside. That's just never been my deal. But if someone asks for my help, I'm activated, I'm turned on, right? I would never go to the beach to go to the beach. But if someone says, hey, let's go to the beach, then I'm like, okay, right? That's how I'm built. It's important for me to know this. So, every goal-setting seminar that I've ever been to in my entire life, the entire personal development industry is built around this concept that your goals need to be your goals. And it just works for me 0%. It's the worst advice for someone like me, right? It doesn't work. I spent tens of thousands of dollars and years going to seminar, and they're like, write goals. And because I was there with people and they said, write goals, I was like, okay. And so I wrote a whole bunch of goals. And then when I left, I felt no desire towards that because they encouraged me to set big goals for myself. I'm not a big goals person and I'm not a self person. I'm an other people person and I'm a helping people person. And when I finally fucking figured it out, which I had to do at my own fucking seminar, not one that I'd paid for, it's bullshit. And maybe I should have paid to go to my own seminar. When I finally figured out that I need to set my goals via other people, everything started to work. I didn't set business goals anymore. I set helping people goals. I set goals as to the quality of help that I wanted to provide, how many people that I wanted to provide, how long I wanted to help them for. That's where the Odyssey program comes from, right? That whole thing is based on my hinging point that I am a helpy other person's person, not a Peter person. Okay? You have to know what your unique code was. Do you understand how terrible it felt for me to write goals and feel nothing towards them? To just sit there and go, well, I don't get it. I don't get why I'm not aspirated towards this, why I'm not motivated towards this. And then you had these dickheads, high-priced dickheads, mind you, that said, oh, you've got to find your purpose. Find your purpose is amazing advice for the purpose people. And it is the worst piece of shit advice for everyone else. If you are not a purpose person, do not go trying to find your purpose. Instead, find your hinging point. Find what works for you. Right? You might be a support person. You want to find someone that has a vision so you can hook up to that vision. If that's your way of doing it, fantastic. Find that. Lock it in. Right? But I can promise you that if your hinging points are not fulfilled, the wheels fall off. And when the wheels fall off, you feel like a sack of shit. And some people have the nerve to call that depression when it's not. It is just that your hinging points, the very unique code, what makes you work, has not been fulfilled. And the second you switch into it, you'll feel all that motivation back, all of that energy back. The shitty feelings will disappear. So what are you? Are you a me time person? Let's make that sacred. Let's make sure you get your me time. Right? I had a wonderful client. This was a couple of years ago now. Mother of a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. We're on the phone. She's from Melbourne. And she was trying to start her own business. Her husband also had a reasonably new business that their mortgage was funding, and the 3-year-old and the 1-year-old. And she said, I just have no energy. I can't do this anymore. The wheels are falling off. And I said, under what circumstances would you function? When's the last time you felt put together? And she said, well, I used to go for a run every morning. And you know what? When I went for that run, I felt like I could handle anything in the rest of the day. I said, boom, hallelujah, we found it. Pay me. I said, you need to move heaven and earth to make your morning run sacred. And she laughed in my ear because she said, I've got a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. My husband has a fledgling business and I'm trying to start a business. There is not a chance, not a snowball's chance in hell that I can go for a run in the morning. It's just not feasible. I said, well, you're going to have to figure out a way to do it, because I can promise you if you do it, everything comes together. And by the way, you can only say this with confidence when you know you found the exact hinging point, right? We hung up and our next call was 2 weeks later on. I was expecting to hear the same sob story again. Anyway, I call up 2 weeks later and I said, hey, how are you? How have things been? Expecting to hear, I'm exhausted. I don't know how to do this. Can you help me with my sales, etc.? And she said, it's amazing. Everything's amazing. I said, well, what happened? She said, I moved heaven and earth and I went for a run. And then that day I felt like I could handle the rest of it. And then I moved heaven and earth again. And I think she called her mother from 2 hours away. Hey, come and stay. I need an hour in the morning to go for a run. She moved heaven and earth the second day and she went for a run and she could handle the rest of the day. Right? And then third day, and then she went for a run 4 to 5 times a week and her life started to come back on track. Those despairing, horrible feelings that she had been having started to disappear because she was hitting her hinging point, her unique code. Some of you need intense, vigorous exercise. Some of you need slow moving exercise like yoga or Tai Chi. If you're a Tai Chi person, you are not an intense CrossFit person. Don't fuck that up. You are not both. Right? And vice versa. If you're in the intense person, then the other one, it can be a preference. You can enjoy it, but it's not a hinging point. Which one's the hinging point? Which one's the one that's your unique code? Which one's the one that makes you work? Understand that, find them, write them out, and make them sacred. Whatever your hinging points are. If you haven't been hitting your hinging points, right? So if I was feeling terrible, the first thing I would do is, where's a bunch of people I can go and talk to? That's the first thing I would do, because I know everything is going to go forward from that. right? But now it's sacred. So what do I do regularly? I make sure I'm on webinars. I make sure I encourage people to ask me questions all the time. Ask me questions. It activates every piece of me. That's my unique code. What's yours? Yours might be eating regularly, sleeping right? Yours might be needing to prove someone wrong. I don't care what it is. I only care that you make it sacred and you fulfill it. You lock it in and fulfill it. So, my beautiful friends, we've been through 6 of the 20 items that could cause you to feel like you have depression but aren't. We've got 13 more to go. They're in your Not Depression booklet part 1, and pretty soon part 2 is going to come to you. I'm going to add an email to you guys to see who is interested in doing the rest of these and going through the rest of these, and then I'll make a time for that if we have enough interest for it. Because there's plenty more to go. But if you think you're interested in following up on the rest of them, just give me a wave or type in the chat box like a hell yeah. Okay, cool. We've got some wavers and we've got some hell yes. Okay, wonderful. So we'll make a time to do that. If you can't make it, there'll be the recording. Thank you for joining me on this webinar. It's important. It's going to help a lot of people. And if you guys want to get in on and change your lives in this way, like I said, all these solutions, nearly all of them are found at our NLP training. There's one coming up in March 8 to 12. You've got the links in your chat box. But I'll repost them again here. If you're watching the replay, then the links to these trainings will be. So that one I've just posted is if you've done it with me before, that is the very, very special reattend price. And this one that I'm posting now is the one if you haven't done this scary and exciting NLP training again. So one has the word repeat in it. That's, you'll know if you've done the scary and exciting version with me before, and so you get the repeat price. Everyone else, it's an amazing price. It's an amazing deal. Make sure you come and get it with me. Thank you for joining me. Thank you to everyone watching the replay. I appreciate your feedback. So send it through and keep your eyes peeled for part 2 of the Not Depression booklet.